Tonight, we stand at the precipice of what could be a defining moment in the history of the Western Hemisphere. Thank you for being here with me. We are currently sifting through a flood of reports that suggest a massive, perhaps irreversible, shift in the relationship between the United States and Venezuela. On one side, we have breathless accounts describing decisive movements by American forces. On the other, we have analysts begging for caution, urging the world to see the nuance behind the headlines. Amidst this chaos, there are statements circulating, attributed to Donald Trump, that suggest the United States is preparing for a level of involvement in Venezuela's oil sector that is unprecedented in recent memory. If these assertions turn out to be accurate, the ripple effects will be felt in every corner of the global economy for decades to come. If you are looking for a place where we cut through the noise and focus on clear, hard-headed analysis, please take a second right now to subscribe to the channel. Let's work together to separate the signal from the static. When we are confronted with events of this magnitude, the most critical thing we can do, the thing that separates wisdom from panic, is to slow down. We have to ask the fundamental question, what do we actually know for a fact, and what remains in the shadow of speculation? Right now, the media landscape and online forums are ablaze with dramatic narratives. We are seeing stories suggesting that the United States has already taken drastic action on the ground in Venezuela. There are specific, unverified claims swirling about the detention of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Alongside these rumors are the comments attributed to Donald Trump, painting a picture of deep operational American control over the Venezuelan oil industry. However, we must be brutally honest about the quality of this information. At this specific moment, the vast majority of these details are coming from secondary sources, anonymous leaks, or political pundits filling the airwaves. We are largely missing the concrete, on-the-record confirmations from primary officials that usually accompany history-changing events. That distinction is not just a technicality, it is everything. You will see some outlets reporting that U.S. forces are already deeply entrenched in operations, while others describe the situation merely as a rapid ratcheting up of diplomatic and economic pressure. There is a massive canyon between those two realities. In the language of international affairs, vague terms like engaged, involved, or supported are incredibly elastic. They can mean anything from behind-the-scenes intelligence sharing and diplomatic arm-twisting to full-scale economic blockades or, in extreme cases, direct kinetic action. Until we have crystal clear, independently verified statements from multiple government agencies, it is simply irresponsible to treat these explosive claims as established history. If you prefer careful, methodical dissection of the news over rapid-fire reactions, please hit the like button. It helps this video reach more people who are looking for a balanced perspective. We also need to understand the mechanics of how early reporting functions in a crisis. In fast-moving geopolitical scenarios, information is shattered like glass. Governments will often release only the shards of truth they want you to see. Political figures often speak in broad, strategic riddles rather than specifics. Meanwhile, media organizations are in a frantic race to be first, often publishing developments before the full picture has come into focus. This doesn't necessarily mean reporters are lying. It means the entire information ecosystem is buckling under pressure. As the audience, our responsibility is to act as a filter. We must distinguish between what has been officially declared and what is being inferred, guessed at, or spun through the lens of political bias. If you agree that this level of clarity is missing from the mainstream narrative, make sure you are subscribed so we can continue to break these complex moments down together. There is another layer of fog here, and that is the political motivation behind the sources themselves. Take the statements about oil involvement attributed to Trump. These comments align perfectly with a decades-long debate regarding American interests in Venezuelan energy. Some experts view these remarks as a calculated signal of strength directed purely at a domestic audience, a way to look tough for voters at home. Others believe these words are a lever, designed to pressure international partners or force concessions in back-channel negotiations. Until we see full transcripts, listen to the recordings, or read the official white papers, these theories remain just that, theories. I'd love to hear your take on this. Drop a comment below and tell me which strategy you think is really at play here. Your insights help drive the conversation forward. We must also apply extreme skepticism to claims regarding the capture or transfer of foreign heads of state. Under the rigid structures of international law, such an action is an earthquake. It carries legal, diplomatic, and security consequences that are almost impossible to overstate. Because the stakes are so high, governments are usually incredibly precise and coordinated when they describe such events. If an operation of that scale had fully occurred, as the rumors suggest, we would expect to see a wall of coordinated statements from intelligence agencies, the State Department, allied capitals, and international bodies. The fact that the reporting is so scattered and uneven suggests one of two things. Either critical details are being deliberately withheld for operational security, or the situation on the ground is far more nuanced than the breathless headlines imply. If you find this step-by-step logic helpful in navigating the news, please like the video so others can find this community. We also need to listen to the silence. Sometimes what is not said is louder than what is. When major global powers, China, Russia, the EU, delay their responses, it is rarely because they are not paying attention. It usually means verification is still happening or that complex diplomatic calculus is being worked out behind closed doors. This waiting game can be incredibly frustrating, especially in an era of social media that demands an opinion 5 seconds after an event occurs. But patience is often the only bridge between misunderstanding a world event and actually comprehending it. If you know someone who tends to panic or react too quickly to breaking news, share this video with them. It might help slow the conversation down and bring some necessary perspective. At the heart of this discussion, we are not denying that something significant is underway. We are simply recognizing that responsible analysis starts with defining our limits. Saying reports suggest is not a sign of weakness, it is a badge of honesty. Saying some believe keeps the door open for correction when new facts inevitably come to light. As official documents surface and independent confirmations roll in, the picture could change in the blink of an eye. When that happens, we must be willing to revisit our assumptions. If you want updates that evolve with the facts rather than sticking to a stubborn narrative, check that your notifications are turned on. For right now, the most honest conclusion is the most modest one. Serious, world-altering claims are being made, but the key pillars of the story remain unverified. This situation demands our full attention, our caution, and our continued vigilance, not our instant judgment. Coming up, we are going to pivot to the engine that drives so much of this conflict, why oil and energy interests are always the centerpiece of these discussions, and how that reality shapes policy. Stay with me, keep your skepticism healthy, and let's keep this conversation thoughtful and open. When energy enters the room, the entire dynamic of the conversation shifts. Oil is never just a commodity, it is leverage in liquid form. Venezuela sits atop some of the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. For decades, that geological fact has dictated how global superpowers talk about, negotiate with, and occasionally collide with the country. So when reports surface suggesting that U.S. leadership is talking about being very strongly involved in that oil industry, it triggers alarm bells that ring far beyond politics. We are talking about economics, national security, and grand strategy. If you are interested in understanding the raw mechanics of power rather than just the personalities on TV, pause for a second and like this video because this is where the real story lives. Oil matters because it is the blood of the global economy. It stabilizes or crashes currencies. It cements or shatters alliances. For the United States, energy policy has always been inextricably linked to national survival and interest. Whether the goal is protecting supply chains, manipulating global prices, or cutting off the revenue streams of rivals, energy is the weapon of choice. Some analysts argue that the aggressive language about Venezuela's oil is a signal to the markets, a way of saying we are in control. Others argue it is a play for future access, ensuring that when the dust settles, the U.S. has a seat at the table. Right now, these are interpretations of intent, not confirmed realities. We need to keep that distinction sharp. If you appreciate analysis that respects the difference between belief and proof, subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. We must also look at the reality of Venezuela's oil sector itself. It is a complicated, broken beast. Years of crushing sanctions, internal mismanagement, and political strife have decimated production. The infrastructure is rusting. The skilled engineers and workers have largely fled the country. Even if a foreign power wanted to take over and ramp up production tomorrow, it is physically impossible. Rebuilding that capacity would take years, billions of dollars, and massive international coordination. That gritty reality often gets deleted from the dramatic political sound bites. Understanding the physical limitations helps explain why these energy discussions are often more about projecting influence and positioning for the next decade than they are about immediate oil flow. Drop a comment below. Do you think the talk of oil is a genuine plan or just a message sent to the world? Another reason oil dominates these headlines is its role in the great game of global competition. Energy markets are a web. A shift in Caracas is felt in Riyadh, Moscow, and Houston. Some observers believe the strong rhetoric is designed to send a shiver down the spine of other energy-producing nations. In this view, talking about oil is a form of strategic communication, a warning shot. If this kind of behind-the-curtain strategy fascinates you, share this video with a friend who loves global politics. It is also worth noting how these oil narratives are crafted for different ears. For a domestic audience in the U.S., talking about taking the oil can sound like economic opportunity or reimbursement. But for an international audience, it raises the specter of interventionism and long-term occupation. Political leaders know this. They choose their words with surgical precision to trigger specific reactions from specific groups. That is why you can never take a single statement at face value. You have to weigh the context, the audience, and the timing. If you agree that words should be weighed and not just swallowed whole, hit that like button to support this approach. From the perspective of international law, getting involved in another sovereign nation's oil industry is a minefield. You have contracts, ownership rights, and sovereignty issues that don't just vanish. Even talking about it can cause diplomatic incidents with allies. That is why governments usually prefer to speak in fog. Ambiguity keeps your options open. When reports mention strong involvement without explaining what that means, the vagueness is often a feature, not a bug. Let me know in the comments, is this ambiguity a brilliant strategy, or is it a sign that they don't actually have a plan? Finally, energy connects to your wallet. Changes in oil policy ripple out to touch fuel prices, inflation rates, and the stability of the economy you live in. That is why these distant geopolitical chess games matter. Understanding the oil factor helps you see how a decision made in a focused room in Washington or Caracas can end up costing you money at the pump. If you want more content that connects these high-level world events to your real-world life, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The key takeaway here is simple but vital. Oil is not background noise. It is the main character. But just because it is central does not mean the future is settled. Claims must be tested against the hard rocks of feasibility, law, and fact. In the next part of this discussion, we are going to walk through the legal minefield, the international rules that dictate what can and cannot happen when world leaders are targeted. Stay with me. Keep questioning the easy answers, because thoughtful viewers like you are the only reason we can have conversations like this. When we move from oil to the law, the conversation shifts from raw power to due process, and that shift is critical. The reports suggesting indictments, detentions, or the forced transfer of foreign leaders immediately summon a host of legal demons: jurisdiction, due process, and sovereign immunity. These are not just dusty concepts for law professors. They are the guardrails that keep global politics from descending into pure brute force. Before we react emotionally to the news, we have to ask, how would this actually work in the real world? If you value understanding the rules of the game over simple outrage, take a moment to like this video so we can spread this calm, law-based analysis. Under international law, heads of state and high-ranking officials are generally draped in a cloak of immunity while they hold office. That immunity is not a magic shield, but it makes any legal action against them incredibly difficult. Courts have to prove they have the right to speak. Governments have to coordinate across borders. Evidence has to meet rigorous standards. Because of this complexity, when reports scream that legal proceedings are already happening, seasoned analysts look for the paperwork. We look for confirmation from recognized courts, not just press releases from politicians. If you think legal clarity is something we desperately need more of in our media, subscribe now so you don't miss our future breakdowns. We also have to distinguish between domestic law and international law. A country can pass a judgment in its own courts, but enforcing that judgment on a foreign leader requires the cooperation of the world. You need extradition treaties. You need diplomatic agreements. Without those mechanisms, a legal claim is just a piece of paper. This is why legal experts always urge caution when they hear dramatic language about arrests in the early hours of a crisis. Drop a comment below if you think the media oversimplifies these legal battles. Then there is the role of international bodies like the International Criminal Court. These institutions move at a glacial pace, and they do so on purpose. They require extensive investigations. They depend on member states to act as their police force. This slowness frustrates people who want instant justice, but it is designed to prevent the court from becoming a weapon of politics. If you believe that slow justice is sometimes safer than fast judgment, hit the like button to support that idea. We also have to look at how legal language is weaponized. Politicians love to use the vocabulary of the law to make their moral arguments sound stronger. Words like indictment or criminal carry a heavy emotional punch. They shape public opinion long before a judge ever sees the case. That doesn't mean the claims are false, but it means we have to ask, are these words being used as legal terms or as political ammunition? Share this video with someone who might be confusing legal rhetoric with legal reality. It could change the way they listen to the news. International law is built on legitimacy. If an action is seen as lawful, it gains the support of allies. If it is seen as a rogue move that bypasses the rules, it invites resistance, sanctions, and isolation. That is why governments work so hard to frame their actions as legal, even when the details are murky. Understanding this helps explain why official statements often sound so technical and dry. They are trying to build a legal fortress. If this kind of behind-the-scenes reasoning helps you see the board more clearly, make sure you're subscribed. Another layer is precedent. How we handle this case today determines what happens tomorrow. If powerful nations are seen as rewriting the rules to suit their needs, smaller nations start to panic. They fear they will be next. This is the quiet conversation happening in diplomatic corridors right now. Legal consistency creates a predictable world. Without it, international relations become a chaotic free-for-all. Let me know in the comments, do you think the rules are being respected or are they being ignored? For us as viewers, the lesson is not to dismiss legal claims, but not to blindly accept them either. We need to stand in the middle. Watch for the court filings. Listen for the judges, not the generals. Look for confirmation from multiple sources. These steps are slow, but they are your armor against manipulation. If you want more content that helps you evaluate these claims, instead of just reacting to them, turn on your notifications. As this situation develops, the legal questions might end up mattering more than the political ones. Laws define the limits of power. In our next segment, we will broaden our scope to see how the rest of the world is reacting or not reacting, and what that silence tells us about the future of global stability. Stay engaged, keep questioning, and remember that a thoughtful audience is the best defense against confusion. When we zoom out to look at the rest of the world, the reaction, or lack thereof, is often as telling as the event itself. Reports suggest that capitals around the globe are watching this situation with bated breath. They are weighing their words and calculating their exposure. In the high-stakes world of international politics, silence is rarely empty. Caution, neutrality, and carefully drafted statements are often signals of deep uncertainty. Many nations are waiting for the dust to settle before they pick a side. If you want to understand why the gears of global diplomacy grind so slowly, like this video and help us spread thoughtful analysis instead of rushed hot takes. The allies of the United States are likely feeling immense pressure. But notice how they respond. It isn't always with a megaphone. Diplomatic channels work best in the dark. Conversations are happening in secure rooms. Leaders are terrified of how their words might crash markets or trigger regional conflicts. You might see a country privately support an action while publicly calling for restraint and dialogue. This hypocrisy is actually a safety valve, a way to balance alliances with stability. Subscribe now if you want us to keep decoding what these subtle diplomatic signals really mean. Then there are the neighbors. For Latin America, a major shift in Venezuela is not a news story. It is a potential crisis on their doorstep. It affects trade, it triggers migration waves, and it shifts the balance of regional power. Even nations that want nothing to do with the conflict may be dragged in by economic disruption. That is why regional organizations almost always call for calm. They are the ones who will have to live with the fallout. If you think the voices of the region deserve more airtime in this story, share this video so more people hear that perspective. And finally, we have the markets. Money hates uncertainty. Energy prices, currency values, and stock markets move on what might happen, not just what has happened. This means that unverified rumors can destroy real wealth. Governments know this. They try to manage the panic with steady, boring messaging. If you have noticed that official responses seem vague, it is because they are trying to keep the markets from nosediving. Drop a comment below if you have noticed how uncertainty itself is driving the global conversation. International stability relies on predictability. When a major power acts in a way that is hard to read, tension spikes everywhere. This is why multilateral institutions, the UN, the OAS, try to slow everything down. They act as the brakes on a runaway train. They aren't flashy and they aren't fast, but they are crucial for preventing a local fire from becoming a global conflagration. If you believe that steady institutions are more important than dramatic headlines, hit the like button. Public opinion is the final piece of the puzzle. Leaders have to answer to their people, and people are influenced by how the media frames these events. It is a feedback loop. As viewers, by being informed and measured, we actually help lower the temperature of the discourse. If you want to be part of an audience that rewards clarity instead of noise, make sure you are subscribed and your notifications are on. As this situation unfolds, the global response will move in phases. The initial shock will give way to clearer positions as facts emerge. Alliances will be tested. What matters most is not the reaction of the first hour, but the stability of the long term. Stay with this channel. We will continue to track the developments, we will continue to question the assumptions, and we will continue to connect these global reactions to their broader meaning. Like, share, and comment to keep this conversation active, informed, and focused on understanding rather than speculation.